Afternoon, evening, or whatever the time zone you're in. We're here, it's kind of nice and dark and cold. I have my heating pad on to keep me warm here on this blustery DC day. Um, just as we get started, I was able to see all the registrations and all the questions that you had submitted already, so thank you very much. So I think most of the presentation will cover the key questions that you have. I've added a little bit of answers to some of those that probably I did not cover explicitly. And then there was some that were very, very program specific. So at the end, I will give you an email address where you can email specifically questions about a program or specific issue with your student that we can definitely get back to you on. Some of the ones that were already pre-submitted, we will go ahead and respond to, but feel free that at the end to be able to do that also. So I'm going to start actually, if those of you can see me, the backdrop here. So actually, just last week I was in Nairobi, visiting our program center there. So that's very fresh in my mind. And you can see the nice little bit of cloud but blue sky and the green of the city. I'm definitely missing the 82-degree weather and all the joy that the students were having down there as I sit here and speak to you today. But it does kind of bring the theme because I was there for about a week visiting the program center and the staff there. So this presentation is a modified version of what we do for students to kind of give them an introduction to the study abroad process. So it is geared primarily toward first-year students and second-year students. So I know that you're mostly family members of first and second-year students. I think we have some who are family members of juniors and seniors. So some of this may not be exactly applicable to you, but it does go over the overall process and helps answer some of the key questions that I think are specifically geared that parents or family members will be interested in. So just a kind of brief snapshot. So our office at AU Abroad, we handle the vast majority of any kind of undergraduate opportunity abroad. Just kind of brief ideas. We have over 100 programs, 30 countries, so we cover pretty much the entire globe. We offer programs during the semester, academic year, and summer. Now at AU, the vast majority of students, close to 80%, will study abroad for an entire semester. So we're quite proud of that, and we do everything possible to make that happen. About 10% of the students will study abroad for a full academic year and about 10% for summer. So given that most students will do either a semester or year abroad, most of my presentation will focus on the opportunities there and the process to go abroad for an entire semester, as it's a bit more complicated than one just going for the summer. So that's what most of this presentation will look at. We have options for every single major. So no matter what your student is studying at the university, if they're double majoring, if they're triple majoring, majoring and minoring, we have an option available. And at the end, I'll give you a kind of a brief snapshot of how to navigate our website to show you where to find more detailed information by major for those students. The other thing I want to kind of think to bring to the forefront is even though we offer programs in most countries, just because a student hasn't started language study in the target language of that country does not mean they cannot go. It means they will probably definitely have to study the language while they're there, but starting the program there is not a barrier. The only real exception to that are the programs in Latin America. So anything in, say, basically Mexico and down, students do have to have a certain level of proficiency in Spanish because most of the programs are taught completely in Spanish. Other than that, most other programs are accessible if students haven't even started the language, except for a few others that are very language intensive, say in Chinese or in Russian or in Arabic. And finally, AU has its own 3 centers abroad. Obviously, Nairobi is one. That's where I just was. Before Nairobi, I was in Brussels. And then we also have a center in Madrid. So those are kind of the 3 centers that are kind of catering specifically to the needs of American university students. On any given one semester, about 25 to up to 35% of students studying abroad will study at one of those centers. So while that's a significant number, it is not the majority. So students go all over the world. But I'll talk a little bit about those centers, given that there are very specific things that they offer there that are quite unique and I think important to know. Now, timeline. So this kind of sets the kind of understanding of what students should be doing when. Looking at kind of their first year, their second year, and then when they're actually starting to prepare to go abroad. So for those of you who are family members of first-year students or loved ones of first-year students, really that first year is first and foremost about settling into AU, getting their feet wet, kind of understanding what their resources are here, getting comfortable being at the university, and then just starting to kind of think about what things they want to do. What are the opportunities out there? They may attend one of our information sessions. They should definitely apply for a passport if they don't have it. That's the one concrete thing students can do early to make the rest of the process very easy. It is always quite shocking to me that all of a sudden a student thinks they're going abroad in about a month and a half time, and that you do not have their passport yet. So obviously we try to help guide them through that, but that's one concrete thing students can do now if they don't have it, and also if it's expired, to go ahead and renew it. So that's kind of one action item that can be done. As students move into their second year, that's also when they get kind of much more focused on their major or their majors or their minors. And this is when they should start then talking specifically first to their academic advisor about putting study abroad into their academic plan. Because at the end of the day, before any student can go abroad, they have to have the authorization of their academic advisor. That is critical so that we make sure all students stay on track for graduation in the time they want to graduate. So we're pretty good about that track record, but this is the way we make sure, and that's the kind of stopgap we put to make sure that nothing goes forward unless their academic advisor authorize it. So those conversations to have are really important early in that second year as that planning process happens, and better to start that process with the academic advisor before talking to anybody in our office, because we're a little bit limited in what we can advise until we understand the student's academic needs. We are going first and foremost on making sure we're meeting their academic needs, they're staying on track, they're getting the courses they need, and then from that, broadening out the experience, whether it's geographic, whether it's specific language acquisition, whether it's a specific experience they want to have. We can then help tailor that down to kind of fit a narrower range of programs. Now, when they start then moving to the actual application phase and actually getting ready to apply to go abroad, students usually start that process 1 to 2 semesters before they go abroad. So at the end of the presentation, I'll give you an idea of the timeline specifically on when those application cycles open, when the deadlines are for planning purposes. But usually kind of at the very end of that second semester before they're going abroad, that's when they'll start the process. Most of the work will be done that one semester before they go abroad, and then they'll go abroad. So that's the general planning timeline for the students. Past that, the really key thing to understand is the types of programs, because each of these types, which we kind of put into 3 broad categories, really defines the kind of experience they're going to have. First is kind of what we call a structured program. And these are programs that are designed specifically for study abroad students. They usually have a very set curriculum around one academic area or one thematic area. So students generally don't have a lot of choice in their courses, but those courses are usually very closely aligned to what they might need back here at American University. There's usually a very high level of program support on the ground. So this means kind of comprehensive student services. It means basically help with housing, with kind of oversight of that housing, help with all kinds of logistical things day to day. A lot of those programs also have extensive study tours or experiential elements that are built into them. Usually students are studying with other students from the United States who are studying abroad, and in some cases, mostly with AU students. And a lot of those also offer the opportunity for internships. So the one really great thing about most of our opportunities is we do carve out in a lot of our locations the opportunity for students to do internships while they're abroad. So in any one semester, anywhere from 25 to 35% of the 30% of the students who are studying abroad will also do an internship while they're studying during the semester. And in the summer, our programs at our centers are focused primarily on internship opportunities. Those are all credit bearing, overseen. There's an academic component. We have internship coordinators at the sites who help with that. So that's also a very key component for a lot of the structured programs, but not all of the structured programs. So a few examples of those, looking at our centers, all 3 of our centers are very structured programs or offer structured programs. In Brussels, we offer one, EU in Action and International Justice and Law. These are ones that are primarily focused at school students in the School of Public Affairs and School of International Service. Our programs that have been running for 40 years. We have our 40th anniversary this year. And both of those programs have a required internship in terms of the programs that they do. AU Madrid, also we offer primarily structured programs with some other opportunities there. So the programs listed there, usually Madrid is our most popular destination for our study abroad students. We'll have anywhere from 40 to 60 students there during one semester. So they have opportunities to look at kind of the Mediterranean region, just the Iberian region. We also do global and public health, and we do have a business program there, which is a different type of program. And then finally, we have AU Nairobi, where also all students there are required to do an internship with a grassroots organization. And the programs there are primarily for SIS, SPA, environmental studies, and public health students. Outside of our centers, we also have other programs, our internship program that we use in London, some of the programs in Germany. So there are other opportunities for doing that around different thematic areas. So when I show you later kind of an example of a program brochure page, all of our programs will be either labeled what type of program they are. So for the structured programs, it will say structured programs, so you have an idea of what that experience is like. The next kind of goes to the other far into the pendulum, which we call direct enrollment. So this is a environment more when students are directly enrolling in a university abroad. So they're either an exchange student or direct enrolled student. So then in that sense, they're integrated fully into the university in that city or country. So there they have a wide range of courses available to them, much like they do here at AU. Students need to be very flexible and very kind of self-motivated because they have to navigate the bureaucracy of an institution outside the United States. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's quite challenging. So this is a really good one, those for students who want to kind of test their resilience, but also have a bit more independence. Because with those structured programs, usually come much more guidelines about what's expected. So students don't have nearly as much freedom as they would in some of the direct enroll programs where they would have probably maximum independence. In some cases, students may have to find their own housing. In some cases, students are living in residence halls at the universities. Sometimes they're living in homestays. Sometimes they're living in a combination of managed apartments or residences. So each and every program has a different living experience, which are also clearly identified depending on the kind of experience students want to have. So these kind of programs, the vast majority of them are in the UK or English-speaking countries. So England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, and also Australia, New Zealand. Most of our partner programs there are this direct enroll model. So students are doing most of the coursework in English, but we also have quite a few of these options in Asia and in South America. So that's kind of like the full independence, wide range of classes, able to get a lot of courses toward a wide range of majors. The last kind is a hybrid program. So it is kind of what it means. It takes elements of a structured program and elements of a direct enroll program to kind of give students kind of a more mixed experience. So usually means that closed programs are based at a center, or they have kind of a core curriculum that students do together as part of that experience, and the ability to maybe do 1, 2, or 3 courses at a local university. So it gives an ability to integrate with the kind of local students, to have a wider range of classes available to them and understand what the educational system is in that country, while at the same time having lots of other support structures put around them and dedicated teams to usually help them with other types of needs while they're there. In these programs also, usually the housing is much more managed. It's usually a placement process. Some of them will also have internship opportunities. So a few examples of those are, for example, in Madrid, our business program there. So our most popular business program is in Madrid. So in that case, students would do some courses at our center. We handle housing for students. They have opportunities to do internships, and then they take either 1, 2, or 3 classes at a local university there with Spanish students. Same thing with the program that we do in Chile. This program, we have a deep partnership with a university in Chile, which we've been working with for over 35 years. So same thing, we have some structured courses just for our students, and then students have the ability to do direct enroll classes at the partner university while we're there. So those are just 2 examples. But when you're looking through our programs and looking at trying the classification, all programs will be listed as either structured, direct enroll, or hybrid. So you'll get an idea of what that experience will be like. Now, obviously, you're all also very concerned about money. So I do want to take a chance to talk about how finances work and how kind of money is handled and what the kind of expectations are when you go abroad. So first and foremost, the best thing to know is any program that you go through through AU Abroad, through our kind of approved programs, all financial aid transfers. It is fully portable except for federal work study. So no matter where you go on any of these programs, it is pretty seamless process and would be applied the exact same way it's applied here at American University. So that's point one. Point two is if you look at our broad range of programs, and we've kind of done very detailed cost sheets for every single program, which I'll show you where to find those. 62% of our programs, if you look at the total cost of the student being in Washington, D.C., living expenses, housing, food, transportation, and compare it to what those estimated expenses are abroad, even after you factor in airfare and other expenses, 62% of the programs are less than the estimated cost of being at AU. So it is definitely possible for any student who's at AU to be able to go abroad in almost all cases. Now, there are specific situations we understand where students may have to be working while they're studying or other commitments that maybe make that difficult, but we try to make it possible financially for everyone to go abroad. And in addition to that, our office offers topped up scholarships for some of those destinations where we know the cost of attendance is slightly higher. This could be the case in the UK, some of our Western European programs, some of the ones in Australia and New Zealand. We do understand that there's other costs there that add kind of above that. So we try to do targeted additional scholarships for students based on need to help with those locations. So that's just kind of the basics. Now, the initial cost that students need to incur before they actually get abroad, very important to keep in mind because some of this will have to be kind of committed before financial aid is kind of dispersed, because financial aid is only dispersed right before a student goes abroad. So certain expenses have to be incurred before that. The first is just the application fee. So there's a $50 application fee to kind of start the process. That's only charged once. If students have backup programs or other, we don't charge it again. At the point a student is accepted to the program, they will have a period of time to commit. Then they pay the deposit. The deposit then, of course, is a deposit, so it goes toward future expenses, but it does confirm that the students are definitely going to go forward in the program, and that's our signal to continue all the additional things we need to do to set it up. So after that point, some costs may be recoverable, some may not. At that point, we kind of give you an idea of what kind of the sunk costs are, but that deposit is our kind of signal that you're confirmed to go. Now, the general things that are going to have to pay before you get abroad is a visa. So for example, depending on where you're going by country, there may be specific immigration costs that need to be handled up front. Certain airfares will need to be paid out at that point, and some programs will need housing deposits that need to be paid directly before students go abroad. So those are kind of things to think about before they go abroad. But in order to understand exactly what those costs are, here's an example of what our budget, kind of a program brochure page is. So every single program that we offer, so this is taken as a snapshot from our website. And you can see, of course, I'm still with that theme of Kenya. I was just there. So there's our lovely students on the equator, which is in central Kenya, and a hike and a conservancy up in that area, is that we have kind of key tabs on every single program, but there's one that I've circled there in red that is a cost sheet. Now, I tried to put that on the presentation, but it really is a mess of like tiny, tiny, tiny print. But I can guarantee you we have cost sheets for every single program. So if you go to one of our regular program sites, you can go on, you can look at it now, you can see what they are, but it clearly shows the cost that AU is going to charge you, which is usually tuition, technology fee, and a program fee. And that program fee differs depending on what's covered in it. Sometimes those program fees are quite high, but that's because they cover housing, meals, excursions, lots of other things. Some of those program fees are a lot lower because that means that some of those expenses you will need to pay directly to the program abroad, which will either be sometimes housing, they'll need to make allowances for meals. But in all cases, we give estimates for all of those expenses, both the ones that you need to pay to AU and the ones that you need to pay directly. And those ones we pay directly, we usually categorize it into housing, airfare, immigration-related costs, local transportation, kind of personal expenses. So we really want to give you a full idea of what the full cost will be without any surprises, because we don't want anybody to come back and say, I didn't know what that was going to be. We want them to be able to budget carefully. So we try to be as comprehensive as possible on those cost sheets. And every single program that we offer has one of those cost sheets. So please feel free to look through that. We can answer questions on it. I was going to show it here, but it's just too much data on one slide. And given we don't know how big it is, so I took it off. But have a chance to look at it. The next thing I'm sure a lot of you are worried about is kind of the requirements and the application process, kind of like what happens in terms of what are the requirements to do. The good news is it is nothing like applying to college or university. So in general, students are allowed to apply one program because in 99% of the cases, if students meet the criteria that's explicitly stated for that program, and do everything they're supposed to do, they will get in. So we take a lot of time advising and working with students to make sure that they've first chosen the right program. If they're qualified for that specific program, they go move forward, but there's a pretty, 99% chance they will get into that. There are a slight few programs that are more competitive or have limited spots for our students. We, at that point, will allow a student to do a backup program so that they do have an alternative, and we kind of talk them through that at the beginning. The primary ones are Oxford in the UK. That's always competitive, so students do backup for that. Our programs in Denmark at DIS, which has a limited number of spots. And then depending on some idiosyncrasies each semester, we may have one or two more. But the vast majority, as long as students meet the requirements, they will get into the program. These are the minimum requirements for all programs. So students will need a cumulative 2.75 GPA if they want to do a semester-long program or year-long program, 2.5 for summer. We need the approval from all their academic advisors. So if the student's double majoring, majoring and minoring, we will ask each of their advisors to sign off on it to make sure they're covering the requirements for whatever they need to commit to. If students are going abroad for a semester or a year, usually the earliest they can do it, other than some very specialized programs, is the second semester of their sophomore year. The vast majority of students will go abroad their junior year, probably 80% of them, evenly split between the fall and the spring semesters, and then maybe 10% during the senior year, and maybe 10% during that sophomore year for students who may have brought in a lot of AP credits or other credits and have kind of moved kind of further along their academic kind of requirements at the university. Now, the only exception is students who went abroad in the summer. They can go, first-year students can go abroad their first summer while they're here. There's less restrictions around that, given there's more flexibility it's not during the semester. There are some institutions that require students to have completed at least 2 years of university college before they can go abroad. This is a lot of the direct enroll programs in the United Kingdom. So they want to see 2 full years of university study before students start there. So that may be a requirement for some of the programs. That's not our requirement, but their partners abroad. And the final thing is we do a disciplinary clearance check on any students. So as long as there are no conduct issues and the student's on probation, they would also be cleared to go abroad. So these are the general requirements across the board, but each program may have very specific requirements. So in the same thing I showed you, the kind of that brochure page, we have this small fact sheet at the bottom that kind of categorizes some key parts for every single program. So in there, you will always see who the advisor is for that program. That's the person that's always your best person to reach out to if you have questions. It will then say whether or not it's advisor required. We require students to talk to us no matter which program we do. So we want to talk to a student before any application gets open to make sure everything is going smoothly. That's also where it might be an additional minimum GPA requirement. Some of them are 3.0, some 3.3, some all the way up to 3.7, depending on the program. So that's where that kind of transparency is. If students are in that level, they'll be able to go forward. That one right there, junior standing. That means students need to have completed 2 full years of college study. So they don't count incoming AP credits or other credits outside. They need to have completed 2 full years at the university before they can go to that program. They also have the language of instruction, the kind of housing that's there, and then what type of program it is. So every single program will have those classifications to give you an idea of what the key elements you need to know about. Now, this is where I wanted to give you a brief snapshot of how to kind of navigate our website, because we try to keep making it as clear as possible, but obviously we see it every day. So for us, we know where to go, and we try to improve it each time. But this is if you if you Google AU abroad, this is the very first thing that's going to come up. So this is our landing page. So if you look across the top, it has like home, my major and study abroad, advising appointments, course equivalencies, and staff. So now this is where if you really want to think about what's best for a specific major or academic area, the best starting point is my major and study abroad. So from that, you click down and go through and you see the colleges and schools, and then below that, you'll have the majors. So that'll tell you all the things students need to do for their major before they go abroad. They need to complete this and that class. They need to take these types of other things. Then how the courses abroad are counted toward their major and any other guidance they need. And then past that, it will have a subset of programs where it's easiest to get courses for that major or for that subject area. So this is a great way for students to narrow down those over 100 different choices for their area of interest. So it's really useful. It's one of the most clicked on parts of the website. We'll continually see that. So it's a really great starting resource. But just so you know, any courses that students do while they're abroad will automatically come back and count as credit here at AU. So you go on one of our programs, the credits will transfer. Students will get full letter grade credit for that, and it will appear on their transcript. Each academic unit then decides how those specific courses meet their requirements. And that's where you see the course equivalency database, where it says course equivalencies. That's where we have a very extensive database that says, if you take this course on this program, this is what it's equated to at AU, and this is the requirement that it fulfills, to give students full visibility into how courses that they take will count toward their major requirements. That database has like close to 8,000 courses in it now. So it's we have one person whose full-time job is basically to maintain that and to kind of navigate that for the students. So they do a fantastic job. The other is advising appointments. That's where students actually would set up an advising appointment with us. Very easy to click to do that online. And then at any point in time, you can see our full staff listing, so you understand who in my office is responsible for which programs. And you can always feel free to reach out to them. They're happy to talk to family members as well as students. Now, please understand that you probably already know this. There's only certain things that they will be able to say specifically about your student situation, but they're always very happy to give information about the programs if there's any kind of confusion. And do not hesitate to reach out to them. We're more than happy to talk to any family members. Along the bottom then are some more kind of general things to do. One big one that students never look at, but parents, of course, and family members are interested in, health and safety. So we have extensive health and safety information there for a myriad of situations, but there's also one that specifically goes into detail about insurance and how insurance is handled abroad, what you need to think about, what we cover, what you need to think about. So I'm not going to go over it exhaustively here, but that's where the best place to get that insurance is. Click on health and safety, and you will get a whole lot of information on there about insurance abroad, our insurance, what that covers, how healthcare is handled. So I know there's a lot of questions on that. Same thing, you could go into cost and financing. That'll help you kind of like look through that. It also shows scholarship activities. Academics then talks a little bit about the credit transfers. And then how to apply kind of goes through that stages we talked about early. But specifically health and safety is a good one to look at, and my major and study abroad. So this helps kind of narrow down kind of our website and navigate through that. So hopefully that will be helpful for you. And finally, just to go a few questions from the audience. A lot of you are asking about housing, not abroad, but what happens when students come back. So just to kind of go through kind of a scenario. So for example, students are on campus in the fall semester and they want to go abroad in the spring. They've signed the housing commitment for the whole year. Any students who are committed to one of our programs to go abroad for the spring will be released from that commitment for the spring semester. So we provide a list every year to the housing office that these are the students going abroad, so they know that those students are going to be released for the spring semester. So that's how that process works. Now, students who go abroad in the fall and are looking at housing in the spring semester, which I think most people are asking questions about, how does that process work? Now, that depends on what students want to do. So in general, knock on wood, we're usually able to accommodate, or the housing office is able to accommodate anybody back on campus they do receive priority if they're abroad in the fall for housing in the spring for openings. And as long as I've been here, students have been able to accommodate it if they want to come back and live on campus in the spring. Now, of course, they may not get the exact housing option they want, and there needs to be some flexibility, but there's usually space available, and those students are prioritized for that spring housing. The other then is what usually happens is a lot of students will go into like looking at sublets from students who are kind of leaving to go abroad. So there's obviously a swapping. So students who are leaving and they were here for the fall and then going away is they will do sublets and they will list on a lot of the housing services at AU spaces available. So a lot of students will take that pass up. And the housing office has different resources to help manage and kind of share that information. So that's generally how the housing thing works when students are going abroad. The other primary question is about timeline. So I gave you some examples, a very explicit one looking at a few semesters. So for example, for fall 2025, which we're right in the middle of that kind of application cycle now, that application, students can start applying for that or could start applying for that in November of 2024. So at the end of last fall semester, we opened up the app cycle, students could start applying, and then the deadlines for the programs range from early January, that's primarily for Oxford, it's a very small number of programs like that, through March 7th. March 7th is our final deadline for fall 2025. Past that, that's it. So that we kind of move forward there. The vast majority of the deadlines are that kind of early March period for the vast majority of programs, but we do have a slight few of them that are more competitive that have earlier deadlines. Now, for students thinking about spring 2026, same thing, we will open that application cycle toward the end of this semester, usually toward the middle to end of April, and we'll have a few deadlines for competitive programs or programs that are specific kind of issues in mid-June. That's the earliest, but it's a very small number. Most of the deadlines will be the end of September. Now, students who are going abroad in the spring semester is usually a much more compressed cycle because we have summer in the middle. And so things are kind of out and about and people are usually not on campus. I mean, we're on campus and we're working, obviously. So we're working through that. But in terms of the mindset of the students kind of ebb and flow of the academic year, summer has a different kind of is viewed differently sometimes for them. So that means a lot of times there's a much more compressed cycle for the spring. Then if you look to say summer 2026, and also kind of looking at fall 2026, same thing, we'll open the cycle in late November 2025. Deadlines will usually be from mid-February to March 26. So that's generally the time frames of kind of when things happen. Once those deadlines pass, then we move toward processing applications, giving acceptances, and then preparing students to go abroad. So that'll be the phase after those. So this kind of gives you an idea of where we are. Then these are just general context. So I'm going to take some questions now, and Samantha's going to help me go through some of those. So here's all of our contact information. So like I said, if you have a really specific question about a specific program or something that's very specific to your student, please email us at auabroad@american.edu. Then that will get routed to the person who's most in the best position to answer that question. And we will definitely respond to that. For those questions that you submitted that were very specific about a specific country or a specific situation, which I saw several of those, I will then kind of send those out to my members of my team who are best placed to answer that and communicate on that. So they will respond to you probably sometime within the next week to kind of answer those specific questions. So I'm going to pause and take a sip here because I'm still recovering from traveling back and got a cold. So I have my tea here. So I'm going to let Samantha kind of go through and see some of the questions you have.
Thank you, Mark. So yes, there are some great questions in the Q&A box. One parent asks, can a student study abroad 2 different semesters? And is this a typical scenario?
Yeah, so we're not talking about students who go abroad for a full academic year. They fall into several categories. So they may be going one destination the first semester and a second destination the second semester. That's not uncommon at all. Or they're at one location for the full academic year. Now, we talk to students then, depending on the 2 locations they want to go, the sequencing of those locations, we may need to work on that depending on what the immigration situation is in terms of what they need to in order to get into those countries. the academic calendars of those students. So one thing to really keep in mind there is anything that's south of the equator. So you're looking at Latin America, Australia, New Zealand, is they have an opposite schedule because their summer is our winter. So that has the biggest disruption usually to the timing of when students study abroad in a few countries that have kind of very different academic calendars than we do. So we would then talk through about the best timing of what's possible if you wanted to put two different locations together.
Thank you. Another question is related to timeline. Generally, when students go abroad, say in the spring semester, when do the programs end? Is it early May? Is it similar to AU schedule mid-May? When are they, I guess, expected to wrap up that spring
Yeah.
semester abroad program?
So a good number of programs will start saying if they're doing the spring semester, they'll start sometime in January, sometimes early January toward the end of January, and then wrap up usually at the earliest end of April, sometimes through May. Now, that's a good chunk of the programs, but some of them, especially the ones say in south of the equator, Australia and Latin America, they will start later. They will start like February, March and go well into our summer. So into June and July. So if students are looking for, say, other opportunities in the summer or internships or things, that a lot of those programs will bleed quite late into the semester, into the summer. So to be very cognizant of that. There's a few others. Germany, some of the programs in Germany are very specific and they have a very different schedule, as are the programs in Japan. But those are the biggest ones. But the vast majority of them are relatively close to our academic calendar. We do have also on those program brochure pages important dates. And definitely now, any program for the spring and for the fall, you can see what the current dates are. Some are estimated, some are already kind of established.
Super. We have a question about, you covered generally about the tuition, 62% of programs are similar or actually lower than a typical semester at AU. But if you are in a direct enrollment program, does the family pay AU or the institution the student is attending?
Yeah, so every program you go abroad at AU, you still pay AU tuition. You're still getting AU credit. We're allowing all financial aid to transfer. So in all cases, students always pay tuition expenses to the university, to AU, across the board. So you will see that on every single cost sheet, there will be a line item for AU tuition. Now, the only cost that they may pay directly to an institution abroad may be for housing or other expenses, but not for any academic related expenses. All that is covered underneath the AU tuition.
Thank you. There's a question, and it may apply to more than a couple of students, but is there any authorization for students who are receiving veteran benefits, GI Bill?
Yes, this is a very, I know, fraught question, and this is something, unfortunately, I'm not the best person to answer the question. We do know there are restrictions that are placed by Veteran Affairs and about the government, about the usage of those of funds for study abroad. And so in that case, the absolute best resource to talk to is the person who is the Veteran Affairs Coordinator. And off the top of my head, I'm sorry, I don't have the name for that person, but they're the ones that we always have to refer students back to. And we're the ones, if they need to justify anything, we provide documentation to them on being able to use those funds. So those usually someone who works in the AU Central Office, who specifically works with students who have information, have grants from the GI Bill or any veterans benefits. And they're very specific things that like we don't control. And I know in a lot of cases there are restrictions on how those funds can be used.
So it sounds like that kind of question, those types of details would be best covered in those individual advising
Yes, and I can, if
appointments.
someone wants to email directly that to us, I can then go back and I can pull the person's name directly that can help give guidance on that. Because that's something that we actually don't give detailed guidance of. We simply always refer students back to the person at an AU Central who handles kind of Veterans Affairs and GI Bill issues.
Super. There are a few questions about scholarships and grants that students receive at AU. Will they convey? I know you mentioned that federal funding does convey, except for work study.
Yep, correct.
But scholarships, grants, other kinds of scholarships, do they transfer?
And they all transfer. So anything that you receive from American University, anything you receive from outside of American University, anything that you receive that's getting applied toward the student's tuition bill and other costs will automatically transfer when they go abroad. It's just the work study part that doesn't, because they're not working. I mean, they're not being able to work for pay while they're abroad in almost all cases. So that would be the only thing that is not portable.
Super. Can you talk a little bit about the safety piece? You showed the health and safety icon on the AU Abroad webpage, but the question is about assuming that most programs are in pretty safe areas for our students. And of course, they need to be street smart and aware. But
Yeah.
how do the advisors, or what do the advisors share with students about kind of awareness in these different locations?
Yeah, so obviously every location has different risks or different kind of things we do to mitigate risks. So obviously we vet every single location. I mean, obviously there's certain locations now we are not sending students because of situations on the ground there. So we keep a very close eye on that very much. We kind of start that process of prepping the students is like once they're accepted the program, we have kind of then orientations that we do here that go exhaustively into kind of health, safety, security things about the resources we have for them, things they need to be worried about at a specific site, general information that everybody needs to think about, and the kind of the resources we can have to help support them. Then they will also, at every single location, do an orientation on site. And honestly, students will probably forget 99.9% of what we tell them before they get abroad. Hopefully some of it will be retained. But then once they're abroad, obviously a lot of that's repeated and gone to much more in depth to kind of orient them to the location that when they're there. And they will go through those things in an environment where the students are seeing it and living it day to day. Now, what I do always, and what you will do is if you have a student going abroad, they've listed you as an emergency contact. Hopefully they have listed you as an emergency contact. At the point we start doing that pre-departure session, I will then send out a communication to all members, anybody who's listed as emergency contact, that'll say, we are now doing pre-departure orientation for your students. These are the resources of the general information that we're giving them on health, safety, security. I will send again information on insurance, all the key things that we know family members want to look at, links also to costs again. And so that also prompts you to reach out to your student to say, can you also please share other specific information? Because I can't share information for every specific program, but we do and record and keep a lot of those programs for each specific site. But at that point, we do ask the students to share that with their family members directly. In a lot of cases, those are recorded. We have presentations for them, but the general kind of health safety guidance that we give, I send that out to all emergency contacts.
Super, super duper. As a parent of a college student, we always want to know this information for sure. On the topic of logistics, do the direct enrollment locations, you mentioned that there's less infrastructure around those programs. Do they typically arrange ground transportation to and from the airport?
Yeah,
Are
some
those
of them,
things in
some of
place?
them do. So even though some of them are classified as direct enroll, they have usually a very large population of study abroad students. So some will offer additional services. So that's part of also the advising going through students. So depending on where students are going, even a direct enroll program may offer more support. Like they'll offer kind of their own housing and help students with housing. In some cases, they will do airport pickup. They'll obviously also do additional kind of experiential elements for the students. So it really depends on the location themselves. Like, usually our partners in Italy, because students are going there, they're American style universities the students are going to, they offer a more robust set of services for the students because they're dealing with those students kind of in larger numbers. They kind of gear toward supporting them. Some programs like, our program in the Netherlands, in Leiden, students are on their own for housing, which we are very explicit up front, is because the university there does not guarantee housing. It does not provide it as part of the process. We know that is an issue for the students there, so we need to work very closely to make sure they understand what they need to do to secure housing there. Same thing with some of our programs in the UK. Some of them very easy to secure housing for them. Some of them more difficult. So that's part of that advising process. So we always make a student talk to us before we open an application, so they clearly understand the intricacies for each and every program. Because it does vary and there's no one size that fits all in terms of experience. So those students who want more services and more support, we try to get them to go toward either structured or hybrid programs, or we gear them toward those direct and pro programs where we know there are more support options available to them.
Thank you, Mark. You showed us the icon that had my major and study abroad. So that is driven from the academic side,
Right.
what my major requirements have. This question is about geography.
Yeah.
Their student is specifically looking for a structured semester in Japan. Do you have geography or location related searches to
Yeah, so if you
identify
go actually,
programs?
if you go on our homepage, you'll see actually, if you scroll down a little bit from what I showed, there is like a search box. From that, you can start a search and then filter by all those options. You can filter by program type, by location, geography, by language, by whether an internship is available. So it offers a much more robust search function if you wanted to start narrowing down all those other things. And within that, you can also choose your major. So you can choose your major, the country you want to go, and see what pops up. So there's a very exhaustive search function. So once you kind of just start the search, you'll then see filters you can go through and filter by numerous criteria. So if you really want to, and it works relatively well.
So this is a kind of a more timely question. Your timeline talked about starting fall 2025 and looking ahead. But what if a student is interested in summer 2025, this summer? Is the window still open?
No, it's still open. So we have same thing. Two of the programs we offer, the deadline's March 7th. So those are still available. So students have gotten reminders this week that those are still available. And then our programs in Brussels, the actual deadline is the 28th of February. We have a little bit more lead time we need there because most students there are doing internship, and there's a high demand for internship in Brussels in the summer. But the programs in Nairobi and in Madrid that we offer are still taking applications. The other thing about summer, just to be aware of, is like we offer programs at our 3 centers in the summer, but a lot of students may do things independently in the summer. So I know a lot of them are doing, say, independent. So we don't offer as many kind of programs during the summer as we do during the semester, because we know students may do things in the summer for a lot of different reasons. So if a student doesn't want to say go on one of our programs, a lot of them will go forward on like some other program. They want to go study, some language in another country. They want to do an internship there. So they may do that. And, we don't need to be involved in that process. We only need to be involved in that process if the student wants to transfer the credit back to AU. So at that point, there is a process for students to do, say, a permit for summer study abroad. So they can do a program and then petition us to transfer those credits. Now, those credits would come in differently than what I'm talking about through all of our other programs, because it will come back as transfer credit. So there's other things we need to think about whether students can use that credit. So we don't want students to do that if they can't use the credit, because there's no reason for them to do it at that point, because some of them will just do it for the experience. And so we talk them through that, and there'll be somebody on my team who also will kind of help them through that process if they want to do it, if they don't want to go to one of the programs that we offer right through our centers.
It sounds like students have to start with what your number one spot was. Start with their own academic advisor. Correct, to have exactly. That conversation.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And then our last question that we have here is emailing the recording. Yes, we are going to post the recording on our webinar's webpage. So I will send everyone, along with the brief survey, the link to webinar's webpage, and probably in a few days, likely early or middle of next week, you'll be able to access this recording, send it to the link to your student, remind them, or be able to have a conversation with them about this.
So I do see also, Samantha, there is a question about health insurance. So we'll see a little more about that. So just so you know, there's detailed information on the website, but just in short, all students who go abroad are covered underneath our emergency medical insurance. So we have a blanket policy that covers me when I go abroad, all the students who go abroad. So if there's a medical emergency, and that usually means medical emergency, if there's an accident, if there's an acute situation that occurs while students are abroad, they will be covered for that specific situation. So even if the student has a pre-existing condition and that condition flares up while they're abroad, our insurance will cover that in an emergency situation. So if they're hospitalized, if they, have to go in to see the doctor, if they need things. Now, in some cases, our insurance can be billed directly, but in most cases, students would have to pay and get reimbursed. Okay, so that's very clear in the process. So we have kind of a set of very detailed documents with that kind of on the webpage that says what they need to do for that reimbursement, but that covers that situation. It also covers medical evacuation. So if a student is in some location and it's deemed that they need to be evacuated back to another country, so it doesn't necessarily mean the United States, but it means a country where they can get better medical care for their specific situation. Usually it is back to the United States. They will cover and organize that, but that has to be managed through our program. And yes, I've handled and dealt with medical evacuations over the 20 years I've been here. I have usually 1, 2 a year, and they are not fun processes, but they do work. And I do want to let you know that they do cover mental health crises. So the last 2 medical evacuations that I've been involved with were for mental health issues. And those students were brought back to the United States, escorted by medical professionals, and our insurance and the providers orchestrated all of that. So that is covered there. We also do have a policy that covers political issues. So if, for example, if there's a natural disaster, political unrest, depending on how much it escalates, they will also have evacuations for that. I've been involved in those. We've evacuated students from Japan before when Fukushima basically erupted, and when they had the tsunami coming in. We've also had other political unrest across the Middle East. We've evacuated students for that reason also. So we do have those provisions in place as part of our insurance. Now, the one thing that students will definitely need to do is maintain US-based insurance, because if a student is abroad, there's an emergency, our insurance covers it. But if they have to return to the US, our insurance will not cover it. So we do require students to maintain a US-based coverage also, whether that's through the university, whether it's through their parents' plan, whether it's some other plan that it needs to be done. That will have to be maintained while students are abroad. And then if students are basically independently traveling extensively outside the scopes of our program, they will need to look at additional insurance, because our blanket policy will cover what we call small deviations. If they're outside their target country for a couple of days, if they're there a couple of days early or late, we have some allowances. But if they're doing extensive travel, say around Europe, while they're there, they will then need to have additional coverages to cover that independent travel if it's outside the country they're studying in. So hopefully that gives you kind of the short version of it, but the website, you can see the full policy details, all the information there. But emergencies we do cover.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, it looks like you've covered all the really burning questions, Mark. Thank you so much. I think
Pleasure.
wrap up there. Thank you all for joining us for the
Yeah.
webinar. Again, we will post the recording in a few days so you can go back and review, share it with your student or another family who's curious, and send your student directly to talk with their advisor, and also to the AU Abroad office. They're in very capable hands here and abroad. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Mark. Have a great evening,
My pleasure.
everyone.
Everyone have a
Thank
wonderful
you.
evening.